What is going on, guys? It is Wrestlemania here, back with another video. Here are the top 10 worst WCW pay-per-views of all time. Just to remember, guys, this is in no particular order, and we'll also be including WCW's predecessor, Jim Crockett Promotions as well. Number 1. Slamboree 2000. By 2000, the writing was on the wall with WCW, hemorrhaging millions of dollars. So, if your company is in bad shape, it makes sense to put on one hell of a show, right? Start with a solid undercard featuring Chris Candido versus The Artist and Shawn Stasiak versus Kurt Hennig. Wait, that's not too good. Well, the show did have Terry Funk defending the Hardcore Championship against Norman Smiley and Ralphus. Wait, did we read that right? Okay, we're not gonna lie, this card has two passable matches. Sting vs Vampiro and Ric Flair vs Shane Douglas. In true WCW form, Douglas and Flair's match had a convoluted ending, with fake Sting showing up, including David Flair, who attacked Papa Flair with a baseball bat. The Ready to Rumble match main event saw Jeff Jarrett win the WCW Championship after David Arquette turned on Diamond Dallas Page. Dare we mention WCW had Mike Awesome toss Canyon off the cage onto the entrance ramp in an angle eerily reminiscent of Owen Hart's accidental and fatal fall at the same Kemper Arena less than a year before. Number 2. Uncensored 1995. Regular viewers know what a terrible year 1995 was for the WWF and WCW. This show is exhibit A of everything wrong with WCW at the time. The company promoted the show as a violent, no-holds-barred event where wrestlers could settle their feuds in unsanctioned matches. Was WCW trying to copy ECW's bloody style? If so, they failed big time, as this was the equivalent of Nickelodeon airing its own version of The Walking Dead. The King of the Road match pitting up Blacktop Bully vs Dustin Rhodes shows everything wrong with the show. Rhodes and the Bully battled on top of an enclosed flatbed and bled heavily, only for the blood to be edited out. Both men were fired for violating the company's no blading policy. Not very hardcore, is it? Meng fought Jim Duggan in a martial arts match, and while it never gets old watching a wrestler beat up Hacksaw, the martial arts stipulation made more sense than a main event strap match between Vader and Hulk Hogan that saw Hogan win when he touched Ric Flair, dressed in drag no less. Number 3. The Great American Bash 1991. This not-so-great bash opened with a capture the flag scaffold match between the team of PN News and Bobby Eaton against Terrence Taylor and the newly debuted Steve Austin. Reportedly, none of the wrestlers were willing to take the dive off the scaffold, so WCW changed the rules, requiring a wrestler to get the other team's flag. You know things are bad when that's your opener. Yawners like Big Josh vs Black Blood, aka Billy Jack Haynes under a mask, and the Yellow Dog, aka Brian Pillman under a mask, fighting Johnny B. Bad had fans in the audience contemplating wearing masks so no one would recognize him at a show that is this bad. Nikita Koloff vs Sting was good, but the main event cage match for the vacant NWA World Heavyweight Championship between Lex Luger and Barry Windham was eclipsed by the former champion Ric Flair's unexpected departure just days before, with "We Want Flair" chants echoing throughout the arena. No one cared much about the match, even when Luger turned heel and sided with Harley Race as his manager. Number 4. Starrcade 1994. Starrcade, the true granddaddy of them all, was sullied by the main event of Hulk Hogan vs The Butcher, aka Brutus Beefcake. The show that had ushered in wrestling's pay-per-view age with a cage match between Nature Boy Ric Flair and Harley Race for Race's NWA World Championship was sullied by WCW champion Hulk Hogan battling friend turned foe, The Butcher. Underneath the so-called main event were bouts such as Vader vs Jim Duggan, Sting vs Avalanche, and Mr. T vs Kevin Sullivan. Number 5. WCW New Blood Rising. The idea behind the New Blood angle was to introduce a set of rising stars and pit them against established WCW stars, aka the Millionaires Club. It was really a good concept, but executed terribly. Matches like the infamous Judy Bagwell on a forklift match between Buff Bagwell and Canyon, as well as the Great Muta doing the job to Ernest Miller, are enough to rank this as a failure. But the triple threat match involving Kevin Nash, Goldberg and Scott Steiner takes the prize. In WCW's misguided effort to swerve fans, Goldberg no-sold Nash's powerbomb and walked out. It wasn't a case of exposing the business, but a case of exposing WCW's stupidity, as the angle made no sense and served zero purpose. Number 6. Sold Out 1997. Did Eric Bischoff believe Three Musketeers author Alexandre Dumas saying nothing succeeds like success when he took the popular New World Order faction and gave it its own pay-per-view? Bischoff's idea seemed like a great one, but the result was a disaster, with the show drawing only a 0.47 buy to the previous month's Starrcade's 0.95 buy rate. The reason the show failed and why it sucked harder than a Dyson was due to ego. The people involved seemed as if they could do no wrong and put on a half-hour show from start to finish. With NWO referee Nick Patrick officiating, the WCW fans knew their wrestlers were at a huge disadvantage. Ted DiBiase and Eric Bischoff called the matches, running down the WCW wrestlers. Whilst heel announcers can be great, you need a balance, and this show lacked it. And frankly, other than a ladder match, the matches were nothing special. Throwing in a main event between Hulk Hogan and the Giant that ended in a no contest, and you had a preview of what the NWO would eventually become. A shell of itself. Sadly, Bischoff and company learned nothing from this show. Number 7. Bunkhouse Stampede 1988. Give Jim Crockett Promotions credit for trying another pay-per-view to bring in the revenue after the WWF killed their 1987 Starrcade show by running Survivor Series against it. The Bunkhouse Stampede concept was anything goes, a come-as-you-are affair with 8 top wrestlers battling in a steel cage. If you're wondering how a battle royal works in a cage, you're not alone. Here wrestlers had to throw their opponents over the top of the cage or through the cage door. As you might expect, this proved for a boring and credibility-stretching night. Unfortunately, the event was a disaster from start to finish. Unlike other WWF rivals, Crockett had a solid roster of stars, but they were foolishly mixed into the main event, leaving the undercard in tatters. Barry Windham defended the meaningless Western States Heritage Championship against Larry Zbyszko, while World Television Champion Nikita Koloff wrestled beautiful Bobby Eaton to a 20-minute draw. While Eaton was one of WCW's best workers, even he had trouble of making Koloff looking good for 20 minutes. This show did prove Battle Royals could successfully headline an event. The only problem was the event turned out to be the Royal Rumble, the show the WWF aired on USA Network to compete against the Stampede. Number 8. Uncensored 1996. Fans who enjoyed the schlock of the first Uncensored got more schlock, including an intergender match between wrestler turned manager Colonel Robert Parker and Medusa and the Big Show vs Loch Ness, aka Giant Haystacks. While the Conan vs Eddie Guerrero match was very good, a 16-minute bout between the Booty Man and Diamond Dallas Page reminded fans why guys like the Booty Man didn't belong in 16-minute matches. The main event, Doomsday Cage match pitting Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan against the Alliance to end Hulkamania, was an incredibly dull 25 minutes of Hogan and Savage getting over at the expense of some of WCW's top heels. Number 9. SUPERBRAWL 1999. Yes, this is the night of super swerves, with David Flair turning on the Nature Boy during his battle against WCW champion Hollywood Hogan. The New World Order angle had played itself out so many times that WCW figured, why not do it again? The pay-per-view also saw Rey Mysterio lose his mask in a mask versus hair match between Rey and Conan against the Outsiders, with Elizabeth's hair on the line. Bam Bam Bigelow vs Goldberg proved Goldberg has no business in matches longer than 5 minutes, and this Super Brawl proved WCW had no business running pay-per-views anymore. And number 10. Sold Out 2000. This was the pay-per-view where mid-carder Tank Abbott nearly won the WCW Championship after injuries prevented Jeff Jarrett and Bret Hart from wrestling. By now you may be wondering how WCW was still in business, despite putting on terrible pay-per-views that very few people were ordering. Sold Out had so many mistakes and goofs, it should have been booked as a pro wrestling sitcom. A match between Billy Kidman and Dean Malenko had a stipulation that neither man could leave the ring. Reportedly Malenko forgot, so the match ended up earlier than planned. Oklahoma, aka Vince Russo's co-writer Ed Ferrara, defeated Medusa for the Cruiserweight Championship. Another sign of how meaningless WCW's titles were. The match for the vacant WCW World Championship saw Chris Benoit defeat Sid Vicious, but Benoit left the WCW the next day for the WWF, leaving WCW without a champion yet again. Well guys, there you have it, the 10 worst WCW pay-per-views of all time. Be sure to support us on Patreon, subscribe if you already haven't, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.